Barron Trump stepped out of the Grand White House conference room, feeling the weight of the conversation still lingering in his mind. It was an awkward family meeting, to say the least. His father, President Donald Trump, had always been a man of bold opinions and assertive decisions, but today there was something about the atmosphere that made Barron uneasy. The usual brashness of his father's voice seemed almost toned down, as though he was walking on thin ice around his son's growing independence. Barron had always been the quiet one in the family, observing more than speaking, but when he did speak, people listened. He wasn't like his father, in many ways. While Donald Trump loved to make grandiose statements, Barron preferred actions over words. He never needed to shout to make his point, and his presence alone carried enough weight. As the meeting came to an end, Barron exchanged quick nods with his mother, Melania, who was seated across the table, her usual reserved demeanor still intact. His siblings, Ivanka and Eric, looked like they had just endured a political debate, their faces strained as they stood up and began to exit the room. Barron lingered behind for a moment, still thinking about the uncomfortable silence that had settled between his father and him. It wasn't as though they disagreed on the core values. They both believed in American greatness, in the power of hard work, and in protecting what was theirs. But lately, Barron had been questioning certain things his father would never understand. Outside, the chill of a Washington evening greeted him as he stepped onto the terrace, the lights of the city twinkling far below. He pulled out his phone and checked his messages. A text from his assistant reminded him about a charity event he was supposed to attend tonight. But Barron wasn't feeling it. He wasn't in the mood for the fake smiles and handshakes of high society. He leaned against the railing, looking out over the city. He thought about the country, how divided it felt, how people were torn between ideologies, fighting over what was right. Barron was a liberal, one of the few in his family who had ever openly supported Biden during the election. He knew it was a stance that made him different, maybe even isolated in some ways. But he didn't care. It wasn't about party lines for him. It was about doing what was right, about moving the country forward, regardless of who was in power. Just as he was lost in thought, a voice interrupted him. "You look like you need to get out of here." Barron turned to find his best friend, Matt, walking toward him with a grin. Matt had been with him through thick and thin, always a grounding force in Barron's otherwise tumultuous life. "Yeah, I'm not feeling the whole family thing tonight," Barron said with a sigh. "It's like they're all speaking a different language. Maybe I'll head out for a bit." Matt nodded, clearly understanding. "Good idea. You need a break from all that. How about we hit up a bar in Georgetown? Get some real conversation in." Barron didn't feel like socializing, but Matt's suggestion was tempting. Still, something else was tugging at him, a nagging feeling that wouldn't go away. "Actually, I think I need to do something different tonight," Barron said, glancing at his phone once more. "I'll catch up with you later." "Man!" Without waiting for a response, Barron made his way to the garage. His mind was set. He wasn't sure where he was going yet, but he was about to do something that felt right in the moment. Barron arrived at the sleek black Mercedes S-Class sitting in the garage, his prized possession. It wasn't just any Corvette, it was the newest 2025 model, a true symbol of wealth, power, and status. But tonight, it felt almost out of place. He started the engine, the roar of the car breaking the silence of the night as he pulled out of the White House driveway. He didn't have a destination in mind. The city was alive with possibilities, but for some reason, his thoughts kept drifting back to the divide in the country, to the way people were suffering while the powerful stood above it all. Barron wasn't naive enough to think that he had all the answers, but he, Caojing, ignored the sense of injustice that gnawed at him. The drive took him down familiar streets, through the wealthy parts of Washington, where the contrast between the opulence of the homes and the poverty of the homeless was hard to ignore. He had seen it countless times before, people living in tents on the sidewalks, wrapped in layers of old clothes, their faces a mix of exhaustion and despair. Yet, tonight, it seemed more stark, more real than ever. As he turned onto a quieter street, his headlights caught a woman sitting on the sidewalk by a small alleyway. She was leaning against the brick wall, her face partially obscured by the shadows, but her posture told the story. She was worn down, defeated, and yet there was something unmistakably striking about her presence. Barron slowed the car as he passed, his gaze lingering on her for a moment. He had seen women like her before, homeless, trapped in a cycle of survival that most couldn't begin to comprehend. but there was something different about her. There was a sharpness in her eyes, a raw intensity that seemed to demand recognition. He couldn't explain it, but something pulled at him. He made a quick decision and turned the car around. The sleek black Mercedes made a soft purring sound as he parked on the curb, a few feet away from where she sat. Barron got out of the car, the cool night air biting at his skin, but it didn't matter. He wasn't here to think about the cold. The woman looked up at him as he approached, her eyes narrowing slightly as though she was sizing him up. She didn't look surprised, but there was a guardedness in her expression, something that immediately told him she didn't trust Isley. "You need something." Her voice was rough, worn out from the streets. It wasn't a question of interest, it was a question of survival. Barron took a deep breath. He wasn't sure why he was doing this, why he felt so compelled to approach her, but he spoke anyway. "I'm not here to judge you," he said softly. "I just wanted to talk. See if you're okay." The woman scoffed, her eyes rolling as she leaned back against the wall. "You've got to be kidding me. What's a rich kid like you doing out here, trying to save me from myself?" Barron wasn't offended. He'd seen that reaction before, from people who had given up on the world. "I'm not trying to save anyone," he said, sitting down next to her, keeping a safe distance. "I'm just trying to understand why someone like you would end up in this situation." The woman studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "You wouldn't understand. You hear, Heish? You've never had to worry about where your next meal comes from, or if you're going to survive the night." Barron didn't argue. She was right. He hadn't experienced what she had, but there was something in her words that made him feel as though he had to do something, anything, to change her circumstances. "I know it's hard," he said, his voice gentle, "but you don't have to keep living like this." She looked at him, her expression hardening again. "You think I want this life? You think I chose it?" "No," Barron replied quickly, "but you don't have to be stuck here forever. You have a choice." She laughed bitterly, a sound that stung in the night air. "A choice? A choice. I've been living on the streets for years, and all I've got are bad options. Do you know what it's like to feel worthless? To have no one give a damn about you? To be invisible?" Barron didn't have an answer. He couldn't know what that felt like, but he felt the weight of her words, the raw pain in them. He took a deep breath and glanced at his car, then back at her. "I've got a car," he said, his voice steady. "A 2025 Mercedes S-Class. I'd like to give it to you. You deserve a better life than this. It's not much, but it's something." The woman blinked, her expression shifting from disbelief to confusion. "You want to give me a car?" Barron nodded. "Yeah. A car, a chance, whatever it takes. I can't promise you everything, but I can promise you this. It's a way out." She stared at him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why?" "Because I can. And maybe it's time someone cared enough to offer a way out." The woman's eyes softened, but there was still hesitation in her gaze. "I've never even driven a car like that. What do I do with it? Where do I go?" Barron stood up, offering her his hand. "You'll figure it out. I'll help you. But you have to want it. You have to take the first step." She looked at his hand, then back at his face. Slowly, she reached out and took it, the weight of her decision settling between them. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Just say yes," Barron replied, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "That's all you need to do." Barron helped her to her feet, and she stumbled slightly, unsure whether to trust him or not. Her hand still lingered in his, as if she was afraid to fully embrace the idea of change. Barron understood her hesitation. After all, people like her didn't often get opportunities, especially not from someone like him. He led her to the Mercedes, his car gleaming under the street. The sound of the engine purring softly as the door opened only seemed to add to the surreal nature of the moment. Barron could see the skepticism in her eyes. She was still processing everything, still unsure if this was real, or if he was just another rich person throwing money at a problem to make it go away. But this was different. He wasn't throwing money at her, he was offering something more. He was offering a real chance, a way out, a new life if she was willing to take it. "Get in," Barron said, holding the door open for her. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly slid into the passenger seat, her eyes wide as she took in the luxurious interior of the car. The leather seats, the high-tech dashboard, it was all so foreign to her. The woman wasn't used to sitting in anything other than the cold concrete of the streets or the cramped spaces in shelters. This was a different world altogether, one she had only ever seen in dreams or from a distance. Barron slid into the driver's seat, the door closing softly behind him. The engine roared to life, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken words and unacknowledged fears. But then, Barron broke the silence, his voice calm and steady. "Where do you want to go?" "Anywhere. I'll take you." The woman's gaze drifted to the window, her mind racing. She was caught between the fear of the unknown and the allure of what could be. She had never been given a choice like this, never had someone offer her a way out. It was almost too much to believe. "I don't know," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I've never had a place to call home." Barron nodded, understanding more than she could imagine. He wasn't going to force her into anything. He knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but he also knew it was the only way for her to find a way forward. "You don't need to figure it all out tonight," he said, "but you're not alone anymore." They drove in silence for a while longer, the city lights blurring past them. Barron didn't try to fill the space with conversation. He knew that sometimes the best way to help someone was to simply give them the space to think, to process. Finally, they reached a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Barron pulled up to a small, unassuming house. It wasn't the grandiose mansions he was used to, but it was comfortable, a place where someone could start over. He parked the car in front and turned to the woman, who was staring at the house with a mixture of disbelief and uncertainty. "This is my place," he said. "It's not much, but it's mine. And now, it's yours, too. You can stay here for as long as you need." The woman turned to him, her eyes Ouija. "You're serious?" Barron smiled slightly. "Yeah, I'm serious. Take your time. There's food in the fridge, clothes in the closet. You can sleep in the guest room or wherever you want. Just take a breath. Start fresh." She didn't know what to say. For so long, she had been struggling to survive, just trying to get by. And now, here she was, sitting in a car with a man who had no reason to help her, offering her a new beginning. It was too much to process, too overwhelming. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaky. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," Barron replied. "You just need to take the chance. That's enough." He got out of the car and walked around to her side, opening the door and offering his hand again. She hesitated for a moment before accepting it, her fingers trembling slightly in his. They walked up to the front door together, and Barron unlocked it with a simple gesture. The lights flickered on, and the house seemed to welcome them. The woman stepped inside, feeling the warmth and safety that she had been missing for so long. It wasn't just the physical comfort that she craved, it was the peace, the feeling of not having to constantly watch her back. She turned to Barron, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Barron smiled softly. "You would have figured it out, but you don't have to now." The next morning, the sun filtered through the windows of the house, casting a soft, golden light across the room. Barron woke up early, as usual, and stretched, his mind already racing through the events of the previous night. He had done something that felt right, something that was beyond mere charity. He had given her an opportunity, a chance to rebuild. And now, it was up to her to decide what to do with it. He glanced at the clock. 8:30 man decided to let her sleep in. She had been through so much, and if anyone deserved rest, it was her. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards or the distant hum of the city waking up. Barron quietly made his way to the kitchen, where he prepared a simple breakfast. He wasn't one for extravagant meals, but he knew the importance of a good start to the day. As he cooked, he thought about his own upbringing. He had been handed everything on a silver platter: his family's wealth, his father's influence. He had always known luxury, but this woman, she had never known anything but struggle. And it made him wonder how much more he could do, how far he could take this. Could she truly change? Could she break free from the life that had defined her for so long? His thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the doorframe. He turned to find the woman standing there, her hair tousled, her eyes still heavy with sleep. But there was a subtle shift in her demeanor. She no longer looked like someone who was just passing through the world. There was something different about her today. Something hopeful. "Morning," she said, her voice tentative but not as shaky as before. Barron smiled, the warmth of his expression a sharp contrast to his usually stoic face. "Morning. Breakfast is almost ready." She stepped into the kitchen, the scent of eggs and bacon filling the air. Her gaze drifted to the table, where a plate of food sat waiting for her. She hesitated for a moment before sitting down, her fingers brushing the silverware. There was an awkwardness between them, an unspoken understanding that they were both still adjusting to this new reality. "Thank you," she said again, the words coming more naturally this time, "for everything." "You don't need to keep thanking me," Barron replied, his voice calm. "I'm just doing what I believe is right." She picked up her fork, but her eyes kept darting back to him, as if trying to decipher his intentions. "But why? You don't even know me. You don't owe me anything." Barron paused, his eyes locking with hers. "I don't owe you anything. But I understand what it's like to feel like there's no way out, new options, no one willing to take a chance on you." His gaze softened, and he looked away, his fingers lightly tracing the edge of the table. "You didn't deserve the life you've had. Nobody deserves that." The woman was quiet for a long moment, her fork resting in front of her, untouched. She hadn't heard anyone speak like that in a long time. Most people, when they looked at her, only saw her for what she did, her past. But Barron, he saw something different in her. He saw a possibility, a chance for change. "I don't even know where to start," she said finally, her voice full of uncertainty. "I've never had a real job. I don't have any skills. I don't even have a high school diploma." Barron leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. "We can figure that out. There are programs. You don't have to start big, but you can start. There are opportunities out there for people who are willing to work for them." She shook her head slowly, as if the weight of it all was too much to bear. "But what if I fail? What if I can't do it? What if I mess up again?" Barron's expression softened, his voice steady. "Failure isn't the end. It's just a part of the process, and I'll be here, helping you, every step of the way. You're not alone in this." For the first time, the woman's face softened. A tear threatened to fall, but she blinked it away. She didn't want to be weak. Not now. Not after everything she had been through. But she couldn't help it. This kindness, this genuine care was overwhelming. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't helped me," she said, her voice breaking slightly. Barron stood up, walking over to her and placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't need to worry about that anymore. What matters now is what comes next." They spent the rest of the morning talking about her options. Barron took her to a local community center where they could help her get a job, and he promised to find a job placement program for her once she was ready. He even offered to pay for any courses she needed. It wasn't just about giving her money. It was about giving her the tools to rebuild her life. When they returned to the house, Barron had one more surprise waiting. He walked her to the garage and opened the door, revealing the sleek, powerful 2023 Mercedes-Benz S-Class, its silver body glistening under the sun. "I want you to have this," Barron said, his voice unwavering. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? No, I can't take that. That's yours. I can't." "It's yours," Barron interrupted gently. "You're starting a new life, and this car, this symbol of change, it's a part of that." She didn't know what to say. She had always thought that people like her didn't get nice things. She had lived in the shadows for so long that it felt impossible to step into the light. But Barron was showing her that it was possible, that she could be more than her past. With trembling hands, she took the keys from him. "Thank you. I don't even know how to—" "Don't thank me yet," Barron said, a hint of a smile on his lips. "We've only just begun." She nodded, still in awe, and stepped into the car. As she revved the engine, the sound of it was like a declaration of promise to herself that she could make it out of this, that she could live a different life. Barron watched her drive away, his heart light. He had given her more than a car or a place to stay. He had given her a chance to live, a chance to be someone new. And as he turned to walk back into the house, he realized something. This was more than just charity. This was the beginning of something real, and he was proud to be part of it.